This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks, welcome to another live session. So let's get started. We'll first start off with a mock interview, and then we'll go over the solution. Is the first candidate on the line? So is Revant on the line, the first candidate? Okay, so it looks like they're not showing up. So would anyone else like to attempt this question? Yeah, would anyone else? Okay, so we do have, so anyone wants to volunteer to do this?
I can give it a try.
Okay, sure.
But
Right,
I
so
haven't prepared, so.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay.
So let me message you the link. Okay, so I just sent you the link to the Google Doc. Also to the whiteboard.
Okay.
Okay, so we see you on Google Doc.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is design the cart system for Amazon, and don't worry about rest of Amazon or integrating it with any existing system. Focus on so think of it as designing a shopping cart from scratch.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So okay. So this is just shopping cart means like users adding items to the shopping cart, that's all. And do we have to cover the part where they have to check out this? Should we take care of the checkout part too?
So yeah, we can get into the checkout part later. But I think for now, just focus on the shopping cart and focus on like scaling it to like tens of millions of users.
Okay, high level I see for shopping cart adding item and removing item. And updating the quantity maybe. So this is mainly, do you want to focus on just backend side of it, like create an API, how to do it, and work on scaling it? Okay.
Yeah.
And who's going to use this? Is this like registered customers or can be like guest customers too?
So these the registered customers. Yeah, I guess yeah, let's do registered customers for now.
Okay.
And let's also make sure it can like sync across all devices. So if there's multiple devices the customer is using, it should sync.
Use by registered customers. Could be synced across multiple devices. Okay, I take this as a high level requirement. So I don't, so this should be, system should be like high level APIs. I would design the APIs would be add item. Get shopping cart. Add item to the shopping cart. It would be, I think, ID, user ID. That would, and there'll be only one shopping cart for user across all devices, right? I assume that should be the behavior because we're planning to synchronize across devices. So
yeah.
User ID would uniquely identify the shopping cart. So add item and would be items. Remove item. User ID item. And clear cart. User ID. So high level, I do.
Okay. Yeah.
This one, get user ID.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, so now what I can do here is, so this is just backend API. So what I would do, insert drawing, yeah. So there'll be just, so storing the cart, I would use some database. Mostly I would use either Cassandra or DynamoDB because it's anyway, we're planning to scale it to millions of users.
Okay, so let's say we're designing the storage ourselves.
Okay, or the database.
Yeah, so actually if you want to draw, I think it would be easier to draw in the whiteboard app.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I don't know if you got the link for that.
So high level will be like API, an app server, which serves the APIs. And then it basically server would request in the database and get responses. And when you say design our own storage, so are you talking about designing the like key database too, or just using a relational database and scale it for multiple users?
Interesting, yeah. So let's say we are going to build a so let's take NoSQL, right? If you want to build our own, let's say we're building our own key value store. It sounds like it's a key value store, right?
Yeah.
So let's build our own key value store for it.
Okay.
But before that, before we get into that discussion, can we talk about how it'll be synced across these devices?
Okay. So rectangle. Okay. So I'll take this as a API. How do I? Okay, this is
like
the server. Yeah.
I think for circle, if you could type B on your keyboard, that becomes a circle.
Okay. Otherwise, I'll just say this is a API server.
Okay, sure.
And basically we need some clients. Let's assume this as a web. Oh my God. Web and mobile. It could be web here too, a different, maybe Alexa. So these are the different clients. How do I sync? So suppose, and so my assumption is that even though there are multiple devices, user will be adding or modifying the cart from only from one of the device. Modification will happen only in one of the device, and when he, suppose he added some items in the web. How do I draw lines?
I think if you can type L, L should turn into a line.
Okay.
It's under the pencil menu.
Okay. Arrow. So basically, if user is doing any modifications on the cart on the web, so he would be calling API add or update calls, and next time the card would be reflected whenever he visited on the other devices. So is it going to be ideal design is like when user goes to another device, refresh his cart, it would be reflected. That's one design. Or do we want to push the changes to all the devices?
Yeah, so we want to push the changes if it's on one device. We don't want to wait for like a refresh.
Okay. How do I push those changes? So there are two ways I can do. Whenever any client is have an active session, it can be doing long polling, like keep on polling for looking for any changes from the server. So one way I can do is there'll be a shopping cart, get shopping cart, get lost modified of the shopping cart. So whenever the cart is loaded on any of the device, it has the information, basically when is the last updated on the shopping cart. So it keeps on pinging for the get last updated on the shopping cart. Whenever there is any changes, it updates the state of the shopping cart on the database. If it is changes, then it goes and pick up the latest.
And would this be so this is long polling?
So one way is like keep on polling. That's what called long polling, right? It refreshes every 5 seconds.
Okay. So interesting. And so this would be a separate call that the app is constantly making to update the cart, right?
Yes. So this
Okay.
is the separate API. Just all it does is like keeps the state of the cart, like what is the last modified, and makes request the whole cart only when if it is needed.
Interesting. So here's the thing with that. How can we avoid doing, like, it sounds like we will do like, that sounds like a lot of work for the servers and for the phone if like every device is doing like polling every every 5 seconds or minute or even 5 minutes. It sounds like a lot of work, right? Because the card might not update that often.
Okay.
How can we do
So
without it?
without it, there's for if it is a mobile apps, there is an option like there's something called like so I don't remember the name. So basically, whenever there is any changes, so one way we can do is like create a whenever there is any change to the shopping cart. So for each user, there'll be list of clients maintained. List of clients will be maintained. For example, iPhone or Android and
Okay.
unique ID.
So like,
So whenever there is any change to the corresponding shopping cart, it basically makes a ping. It's kind of I forgot actual term.
like
It's called
notifications, right?
SMS ping or something. Sorry,
Okay.
notification. I mean, notification means it doesn't respond to the notification. Or maybe it can. I'm not sure how the iPhone apps works, but there's something called SMS ping. All it does is like pings the client, and whenever the ping is happened to the client makes a call to the server.
I see. Interesting.
Similarly, I don't know if there is any functionality that available in the phone apps where server can make a call to the client and client makes a request back. But an SMS ping works that way. So it's basically based on the user phone number. What it is like makes a SMS ping call, then app calls back the server.
So what is the benefit of this versus standard notifications?
Standard notification is just a message pop up on the phones, and this standard notification would be independent of the actual app that we use.
Oh, how is that?
I mean, that is my assumption. I'm not sure. If there is any standard notification sent to the phone, I don't know if app can detect the notification and calls back the server. If that works, maybe I would do that. Like I would use that approach.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about that. If that is a functionality available.
So let's say we want
to. This is the one. High level, this is what I'm thinking. Like server calls calls the client with callback method, basically.
Got it.
So how to implement that depends on the available. Yeah,
that makes sense. So again, like notifications, SMS ping, I guess that should work. That should be fine. I guess on the web, that might be a bit troublesome. Like on the web, I don't know if you can do notifications.
On the web, so web, I prefer long polling because you can't really, web is usually HTTP stateless, so you can't really call a client there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So is there a way? So let's skip for now notifications. Just forget those. Is there a way you can use existing APIs? Like instead of adding an extra API call, can we use existing APIs in some way? So if there's an app or a website, there's already a bunch of calls going to the server, right? Can we piggyback on those to pass a message saying, hey, the card has been updated?
Without adding the get last modified? Using only this
Right.
for get added, okay.
Right.
So only assume like only these are here, and how do we sync without? So using just this, that means long poll would be calling get cart all the time for the web applications.
So let's say we don't want to use long polling.
Okay. And other than that, then what else I can use? I could add item.
Like, let's say that there's not just these APIs. Let's say our Amazon app has other APIs too, right? Which could be like anything, like get product or get homepage, get feed, whatever.
Okay.
Get feed, get product, there'll be like a bunch of API calls. Can we use any of those or all of those potentially to relay a message that, hey, your cart needs updating?
Oh, okay. So if I consider the like Amazon, it always has a header with the small shopping notification on the top. Total number of carts are so whenever any API makes a call, so basically the response of APIs will be JSON, and any API call makes would always request get feed. Okay. So there are two ways we can do. So every API returns the total list of items in the cart. But the problem with that is like if user keeps on adding the items, doesn't check in, it might become like too big. So because usually cart includes all the item details and everything. So to avoid that, there could be two structures for the cart. One is long cart details structure with all the product item and everything, and cart short version. So basically just a product ID and count. It's like a simple map, and product ID and quantity. So this is a simple map. So any APIs would basically include this, and the reason for this is like usually any page would display on the cart icon and small description as part of header. Whenever it gets the new as part of any API call response, it compares both the details like it makes a comparison between these two maps. If
Mhm.
it is any differences, then it makes a call to the, it just updates and notifies the user with a like some kind of icon displaying that there is some change in the cart. And when the user clicks on it, then it makes the actual get detail cart call.
Okay. Okay.
That is one approach.
So that means that with each API call, you're going to be sending the entire cart details, cart short, right?
Yes, cart short details.
Okay. Got it. Got it. That's a pretty good approach. I think that should work. Is there any downside to that approach you see?
The downside is every so whenever, so one thing is like if so it has all the APIs have a dependency on the cart service basically, and whenever any API makes a call, it also has to call a get cart API to get this cart details basically.
Yeah.
So for some reason, if that service goes down, one is like it's going to add a lot of overhead of each and every call is going to make a call to the cart service details. That is one thing. And for some reason it slows down, it's going to slow down, cart service slows down, it's going to slow down all the services. That's the second problem. And also to make it faster, we have to store it in a cache. And so that means each and every update has to be updated in the cache too. So there should be like either write through or like it has to be done simultaneously so that to avoid the race conditions.
Yeah, makes sense.
And what else? Yeah, I mean, I think main problem would be it's going to add a lot of load on the get shopping cart API, and also it has highly coupled basically. What that means is like if for some reason cart API slows down or stopped working, it's going to have effect on all the APIs.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Can we? Can we like avoid calling the cart API or sending the entire cart items? In this case, you're kind of sending a map of all the items.
Yeah.
Can we avoid that?
So to avoid that, what I can do is then I'm falling back to that idea of like cart last modified. Oh, okay. Actually, I can do this one instead of that. So another approach. So whenever user adds like any changes on the cart that modifies the state, it would assign a version number to the cart.
Okay. Okay.
So always like for each user ID, so there will be latest cart version would be stored, and each and every API would return that cart version, latest cart version basically. All the APIs will include latest cart version. If it differs from the existing cart version, then it makes a call and get the latest version.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good, I think that's a good solution. Yeah, you can just do versions. Yeah, so the versions, so you have, what is a version? Is it like an integer or what is?
So it could be, I can use just some integer increasing for each user ID, but over the longer time, it might become how would I do that?
Yeah, so I guess you just need like a unique ID almost, like for each cart.
Yes, I mean for each cart unique. I mean version can be repeating, like for each user could have starts from 0 and could be incrementing number. But if the user is there for like many years, and even if he does, I'm thinking like integer, does it work or it's gonna overflow? I think it would work. I mean, even if user does like 10 operations per day, I think still would be good.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Any other
also
alternative?
once he clears the cart, version would be rolled back to 0 again. Like the cart would be cleared when user places an order. So then version would be reset.
I see. Version will be reset. I'm trying to think if there's any downside. Is there any downside to that? Like, will there be any problems with that?
Problems.
Maybe not. It might work.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, only thing is like the APIs, when they compare, all they have to do is like if the version differs from the latest version mentioned on the API, they make a call instead of comparing the version number. Because version number could be, it might use like alpha numeric characters with the dots. So it's really hard to compare for the client. That should be on the server side logic.
Yeah.
All it has to do is if it is not equal, make a call.
My only concern with getting back to 0 is that let's say that a device A, and I'm writing on the chat and on the Google Doc here, goes from 0 to 1, back to 0, back to 1, and let's say device B was already at like version number 1, right? And it asks device A. It can get any of these 3, right? Because device B came back online.
Okay. So I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So it might still get the stale version, but because version matches, it might not call back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of version, maybe we can just use timestamps.
Yeah, timestamp makes more sense. Yeah, that's like same as like last modified, right?
Yeah. I think that should work. Yeah, just do a last modified, and then yeah, each API call could have a last modified or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, version is useful if there are like user is adding a couple of items in web page and he added a different items in other font before it gets synced. So the version would be useful to merge those changes, but that should be at the server side logic.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense actually. If like two people add some items, that's actually interesting. Yeah, versions might actually make sense.
I mean, I think it's version field would always be there, but to check the syncing, maybe I can still use both version as well as last modified date.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think conflict resolution will be an issue here, right? Because device A adds one thing, deletes something, device B adds something, deletes something. I think versioning definitely makes sense in that case. Because then you can like merge them together. Yeah. There's a conflict. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the high level design. I mean, it should be then, so next scaling, right?
So no, I think, so let's talk more about this. So I think this makes sense. There's one more interesting angle we can cover here.
Mm-hmm.
So this was really a good exercise. I think it was very interesting. Let's talk about updating prices. So what happens? So we talked about updating carts and cart items.
Okay.
But like, let's say a price of an item gets updated.
You mean
Then,
changes?
yeah, changes. Yeah. How will it be updated in the cart?
Okay. And change item price changing is independent of user action, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like there is some promo got introduced and price got down. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this could be so does it need to be notify the user something like hey, the items in your cart now reduced, do you want to check out something like that, or it should be reflected only when user access the web page? So depending on that, the approach I would take depends. If it is like just user should see the changes only when he visits the web page or application, then all I'm going to do is like whenever there's a get shopping cart call, if so basically shopping cart on the database side, all it stores is the shopping cart product ID and
Yeah.
quantity. So if there is a price change, if we need to notify the user, one thing I can do is I would assume there will be a pricing service.
Okay.
Which has the our product items and price. Or the thing I could do is like I maintain a list of items that are added to the shopping cart but not yet checked out. Two ways I can do. Okay, there are two ways I can do. One is type A, maintain product IDs. That would be hard. So one is like create a scheduler kind of shop, cron job kind of thing. Usually price, I assume it won't change. It won't be really dynamic. Maybe changes once a day. So cron job might run once a day. All it does is like looks up the shopping carts in the system that are older than specific amount of time. Gets the list of product items and gets the list of all the product items and see if those product items prices changed. If changed, it will notify the user. That is one thing. The problem is that might be a lot of product IDs and a lot of queries basically. If I keep a list of products added to the shopping cart, if the and keep subscribe for the price changes on this product item, but I also need to keep track if that item is removed from the shopping cart.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You know, for each
if,
product, it shouldn't be added. I think each product shouldn't
but
be
each
in.
product, but I can't really don't know which items, right? Because we're trying to keep track of for everyone.
Yeah,
Okay, I can
yeah.
do this. There will be, suppose, I assume there is a system where I can subscribe for price changes
Hmm.
per item, and whenever some user adds an item to the shopping cart, I would subscribe for, I'll subscribe for that item basically, for that user. So consumers would be user IDs for the product item. But if he removes any of that item, we'll remove that user ID from that consumer.
I see.
So whenever there is any price change for that item, it knows which user to notify. And one is we don't update on the card, because all card does is like just the product ID and its item. Whenever he sees the shopping cart, he will see the updated price. And before that, if there is any price change, it can be notified through notification. On the web, it will be top banner, and iPhone, it would be just notification, and could be email too. And with this approach, we can also notify the user if the item is ran out, like it's not available anymore. That functionality can also be covered.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be just price changes, like could be subscribe for item products.
That's a good one, yeah.
Item changes or
Yeah. So each user has a set of items they've subscribed to.
yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how would, let's say that I'm user A and I've subscribed to user A and I've subscribed to like 10 items, right? So how does this look like in the back end? If let's say item 53 changes, how will the message reach the user, I guess?
Okay, so whenever user adds these items, so basically he's for like 1, 2, 3, 5, he has a list of users basically subscribed. One is user A. It could be when user B adds, it could be user B. So for 53, it would also be same B. A, sorry. So if price of A changes, basically it could be some topic basically for each so whenever there is a change on 53, consumer basically gets the list of users. For 53, it gets the list of users. Item 53.
Got it.
Item 53, list of users is A, and from A, basically it invokes a what I can do is like it should be offline, so it invokes a function or a process, basically invokes a process which calls set of actions. Actions will be based on the type of changes that item gave. Could be mapping, like price change, action could be send email notification.
Yeah.
If limited availability, only 2 left maybe. Limited availability could be same thing too. Email or notifications. These are like individual actions can be written separately.
Yeah.
And also it could be it can also be configured as another system, like for each user can opt in, opt out kind of thing for email or notification, depending on user preferences. So these notification can also be configured if user wants to notify price changes or not.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that's what you're asking, like what happens?
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. You have a list of users, and then what happens when a user removes an item from the cart?
Oh, so then the user should user also needs to be unsubscribed from that item. If or whenever the shopping cart gets cleared, those items should be like user should be unsubscribed. So the problem is what happens if user clears the item, the code that calls unsubscribing like part is failed for some reason. So in that case, user might still get the notifications even though he doesn't have any items. So it's like a transactional property, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, what should I do? So if user removes the item or clears the cart, to keep the user experience, to have a better user experience, basically it should be cleared and that's it, user should be notified. And unsubscribing to the item changes, that should happen as part of it. Even if it fails, should retry that. So basically what I can do is if it fails, I wouldn't know what items to, okay, unsubscribe. Okay, I can do one thing. So I could have a user subscriptions status kind of. It's like basically to track what is the user status. So whenever we subscribe, it has a list of topics user got subscribed.
Okay.
So it's basically to keep to basically make sure that system is in proper state. It's in appropriate status with the failures and all. So one way I can do is it periodically checks the list of topics matches with the cart items, or it checks only whenever there is a so that is it could be one is periodic checks like a cron job, or I can have a status as a status for cart clearing, cart changes basically. So status would be cart updated, and the next one would be subscription updated. Successful. Everything is done, then successful. So it basically lists of steps till what stage it is successfully processed.
Yep.
So if it is successful, it doesn't do any checks. If it somehow, like if it is stuck at cart updated, then it calls the subscriptions, update subscriptions. So basically checks the cart and updates the list of topics again. Is it clear what I was trying to explain here?
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay. Yeah, let's call this the end of the interview then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was pretty good. Do folks have any? It was pretty good discussion. Do folks have any suggestions from the call
Yeah,
about?
I think I found it easier to type than the drawing.
Yeah. Yeah, there were some interesting suggestions in the chat. Like one suggestion was to hash all the items in the cart and then compare it with
Oh, that's
that.
okay.
But that should be very similar to like last modified.
Yeah, but hashing usually takes time if it is strings we use. A product items, right?
Yeah, it's very, and then the only thing we're achieving is we're checking if it's the latest version, right? So
yeah,
I guess it doesn't. Yeah, it should be as good as last modified. But I like the versioning because, yeah, because multiple people can update the cart, right? So I think versioning would definitely make sense. Then, so there's a question here, should any updates to the cart be queued to avoid race conditions? So I think that the versions will be implicitly queued,
I mean,
right? So
I would assume like it's as a like web page, it's assumed that the cart would be used by just one user. I would think like queuing is like it's overdoing the design. If user is doing that, he's doing it on purpose just to test the system, and he knows he might lose it, some of the items. I wouldn't do it. Like I would just pick the latest one and at the end of the day, it's not very critical because this is not costing any money, and what happens is at the checkout.
Yeah, makes sense. Also, I think when you do different versions, like before adding a new version, our system should resolve conflicts, right? So that would take care of multiple updates to the cart.
Yes.
That's implicitly queuing, right?
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like similar to Git merge.
Yeah, actually it is. We are very similar to like Git merge. Yeah. Yeah. Any inputs from people who've worked at Amazon or a tech company that does e-commerce? Any inputs from real experience? Is this how it works, or any interesting take on this?
I mean, I think usually the Amazon cart, I saw like there's different steps to like save for later and wish list, move to wish list.
Yeah.
It usually has like a lot of functionality.
Yeah. But I think this cart, I think this is pretty. The basic functionality should be pretty good. I did like this question though. It was really a good question, I think. And it was, I think, actually asked at Amazon. I think last time one of our students talked about this. I think they were asked this at Amazon.
So usually this is how we should start, or should I start with the diagramming like server, database?
Yeah, so I think a diagram would definitely help, but because it's on computer, then it kind of makes sense. It was a bit hard, like drawing the diagram over here. But also, like I think you spec'd out the API, which was really good. And like this particular angle that we took it in, like syncing across multiple devices, it doesn't require a high-level diagram, right? Because we're kind of just assuming that all that is in place.
Yeah.
So I think in this case it was okay. And you did draw like over here API server web, so that's okay, right? I think in an alternate question where, or an alternate turn where the interviewer asks you to design the entire system at a high level, then yeah, high level diagram makes sense. But in this case, the interviewer was specifically interested in one problem, which, by the way, it's becoming more and more popular because everyone starts drawing high level diagrams, the same stuff that's online. And so to differentiate now, to challenge the users more, students more, interviewers are slowly like changing things up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was pretty good. Is there any part of this that folks on the call would like more explaining? Or did people on the call kind of understand this?
Can you please repeat that versioning?
The versioning part, yeah. So the actual version resolution, I think we will not get into. I guess we could. So it's basically, let's say device A. Let me draw this on the whiteboard. So let's say multiple devices who are accessing, who have shopping carts open, right? The same account, multiple devices, maybe like family members. So have device A, device B, C. So let's say that each of these makes an update to the cart. So A, B, C, and they all add, let's say each of them, for now, let's consider just adding products, and then we'll do removal, right? So let's say each of them adds a product. So user A adds item, let's say a sock.
Considering all three devices from the same account?
Yes, yeah. Sock, shoe, and I don't know, what's another footwear item? Sandal, right? So each of these added 3 items. So if this was just based on timestamps, last updated, then it becomes a race condition, right? One of them will win because the timestamp, let's say here was 4456 millisecond, or let's say like 10 a.m., 10:01 a.m., 9:57 a.m. Then the latest version will be the item with the shoe. And let's say device B hasn't updated these 2 versions, right? So device B doesn't have the sock and sandal at cart. Then if we just do based on timestamps or hashing, then we'll end up with the shoe in the cart and no socks or sandals. Does that make sense? So, which is why it makes sense to have a version number. So this is a timestamp approach. Timestamp / unique ID, I guess. But yeah, it's a timestamp approach. Instead, let's say we do versions. Okay, so So here we say sock, you give you version number 56. And let's say we have a centralized counter. So the version number is kind of centralized. Okay, so there's a counter here, which is the version number. Okay, so version counter.
I have a question here. So, so my question is that you maintain one cart, and every time you update a cart, why can't you just check what is updated in the cart, and then you can alert a user saying that, you know, one item is added or removed from the cart somewhere else, so that and then you refresh the cart instead of doing all this versioning. You know, you are actually overloading the whole system, right?
So I guess you know, let's say that 3 people are adding things to the cart. I mean, that's the same approach as timestamp, right? Where so you're saying you notify the user, hey, someone has added this to the cart?
Yeah, I mean, you just maintain only one version of the cart, and then you know, even if someone is updating a device, let's say if someone removed that one item in the cart somewhere else in device B, and the device C is trying to add a cart, add an element to the cart, I mean, add an item to the cart. At that point of time, you check what is there in the cart in the system, and then technically there will be one item missing, and then you can refresh the cart saying that, you know, one item have been removed by some user, whatever the user in this device, and then, you know, you just alert a user and refresh the cart, so that we just keep one cart all the time. You don't even have to maintain any version.
So I guess the question is, what happens if 3 people or 2 people update at the same time in that case? Or by like at the same time, I mean, let's say the same minute.
If it is the same minute, it's still the same problem, right? Even with the timestamp, you will still have the same problem, right?
So you leave the decision to the user essentially that, hey, these items are in the cart. Basically, you're saying manual resolution, right? Manual conflict resolution.
Yeah, basically, I mean, we are just trying to avoid if someone is logged in with the same user in different devices, and then they're trying to add to the cart or remove to the cart, which is fine, or it could be the same user. But once, I mean, we are just trying to check against the cart which is already in system. Anytime you add or remove it, making sure that it is one system, and then just alert a user. We don't have to maintain all these things, right?
So
but then you're depending on the user to refresh. You're leaving the task to the user.
I mean, we can refresh it automatically, right? We don't, I mean,
but yeah, you're depending on the user to refresh. That may not happen.
No, I mean, you can refresh. You don't have to rely on user, right? When you just add a cart, and then you can just refresh the cart based on what is there, and then you can say a message in the cart saying that, you know, the cart has been refreshed with some message, some notification on top of the screen saying that cart has been refreshed, saying that one item has been removed in other devices somewhere else. Just put some kind of notification.
Yeah. So I think that would work if the items were not overlapping. It was just like adding 3 different items. Then that makes sense. But what if you delete an item? What if 2 people are operating on the same item? Or if you delete something from the cart, then how do you do conflict resolution, right? In this case, I guess what you're suggesting is you let you notify one of the devices and let them resolve the conflict, right?
Yeah, I mean, even with your approach, the conflict resolution is not handled, right? I mean, you will be having still one version. You know, even if you have 2 users updating 2 devices, you know, adding or removing some other items, you know, you are still going to show only one user card, whatever the latest update made by user. The other user will be again surprised not to see the items in the cart, right? I mean, you'll be seeing whether the other user removing it or other user adding it. They're going to see some additional things. The conflict resolution is still not resolved here with this solution, right?
Right. So I guess what's interesting is, so this has parallels to like Git, for example, right? So versioning is just one way to do this, right? So you're saying just have one global version, and do conflict resolution based on that. I think that makes sense. So it's kind of like the centralized SVN model, like with conflict resolution on the. So that I think that does make sense.
The one thing is, right, I mean, one thing
the
we can
only
do, right?
thing,
Anytime you add an item, we should also add where it is added from, which device or which browser with IP address, all the details we need to capture.
right.
So in that case, when someone is actually updating an item in the cart and someone is removed it already, we can say that, you know, this item is removed by this same user or from this device, which we can put a device saying that, so that they can aware of it. Someone is actually doing something else there.
Mm-hmm. So that does make sense. The only caveat I would add is that the reason Amazon doesn't do that is because they are concerned about the availability. So the infrastructure, if you can guarantee that this infrastructure will be available all the time, then that makes complete sense. But I think the reason that Dynamo does not do that is because they realize that at some, like it may not become, like it may not be available at some point, right? Or the network might go down at some point. So they want to store versions so that they can resolve the conflict later as much as they can.
Hey, Harsh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Thomas here. So I just want to throw something out there. I think part of what the diagram is missing, and maybe the conversation also, is that, you know, the client doesn't add these items directly to the cart. Like you were saying, you know, these items are sold by millions of different providers, right? So there has to be a middleware layer or like an orchestration layer between the client and the database that's communicating with all of these other you know, product providers, the sellers. They have to check inventory. So making an addition to your cart is not as simple as just the client saying, add this item to my cart. The client has to talk to a data layer that's going to reach out and check on availability before it adds your item to the cart, because you got to consider the 100 million other users that could be adding the same item. So, you know, it's in that middle layer where you would try to keep a record of, you know, whether the cart has items pending to be added, or whether another client, you know, just updated the cart. And it's in that middle layer where you could, you know, run those hashing functions and kind of keep the different clients in check, while the, you know, the data layer would communicate with the actual database that holds the, you know, the single source of truth of what's in your cart, which would be, you know, your entire cart object, like your, you know, your user ID down to all the product details, down to the product prices and descriptions and details and all that sort of thing. So I think that's, you know, where a lot of this conflict resolution needs to happen, is in an API separate from the cart API and the cart database.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. I think in this case, we're just considering a simplistic model where all this, like, you know, the server doesn't have to do any extra processing. But yeah, definitely in a real system, there would be a lot more like processing to be done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and also this brings the interesting question, right? When someone adds an item to the cart, you know, that may be available at the time of adding it to the cart. I mean, the stock may be available at the time of adding to the cart. And when they actually submit it, when they actually submit the order, the item may not be available, right? So in that case, so the Amazon should say that the item is already sold, or what should happen in that case? Because I have never seen that kind of situation when we order in Amazon. It's always available. So in ideal world, you know, I mean, if there is only 5 products there, and if 5 people are, I mean, it could be, we can add more people to the cart, right? Because it's not actually someone did not actually sell that yet. So in that case, what happens? So whether the Amazon actually checks the number of items available against the inventory before they place the order?
So I think so. I've definitely seen both things happen. First, like the obvious one, which is before checking out, they definitely check, and then they notify you if one of the items is not available. But also the second item, which is like the cart also updates if an item goes out of stock, right?
I mean, sometimes even Amazon accepts the order, but then you get a refund because there is not enough quantity to fulfill the order. These things usually happen during like holiday season sometimes.
They try to keep a buffer in there as well. So, you know, if you only have one or two items left in stock, they might go ahead and just call it out of stock, or you know, they'll try to keep a buffer where you know they don't show the product for sale if it's below a certain number and they have a certain number of users to support.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's checked multiple times. So when you add it to cart, and then anytime your cart updates, the inventories, you know, reserved for you. And then when you go to checkout, they'll check it and they'll take it out of stock at that point. I mean, Amazon, you know, who knows? Amazon's got so many sellers. It's just probably a super complicated system, but
No, that is fine. But my question is that let's say there is only one product available for one of the item. So whether two people can add item to the cart or no.
no. I think once you add it to your cart, see, and it's interesting too. If you talk about like, if you ever bought
Because
tickets to a concert,
you
they
add
put
to
you
the
on a
cart.
timer.
So, but technically, Amazon will allow you to add it to the cart for many number of days, right? I mean, you cannot actually, I mean, they won't expect you to order sooner, right? So it can still stay in the cart for a very long time. So technically, so two people can add item to the cart, right? Any item to the cart at the same time. Let's say only one item is available, and both can add it to the cart. And then let's say at 7 a.m., someone is actually added to the cart, and 7:01, someone else is adding it to the cart, and 7:02, the first guy is placing an order, and 7:03, the second guy still sees an item in the cart and he places an order. My question is that whether that is possible, and then if that is possible, then the Amazon should actually alert saying that this item is actually taken out. I mean, it's already sold out or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think they would check at checkout if there's still quantity available. But yeah, I was bringing up a situation where if you go to buy concert tickets and there's a limited quantity and you put them in your cart, they will take them out of inventory, but they'll put your cart on a timer. So I think situations like Amazon, where you, like you said, you can have the item in your cart for you know, an undisclosed amount of time, they probably don't actually take it out of inventory until you try to check out, and that's when they would tell you most likely, you know, that it's out of stock.
Yeah, I mean, ideally that should be the one, but I have never seen anything in Amazon. You know, we had a lot of stuff in Amazon. It's always goes through it. Maybe it depends.
Yeah, but not on Amazon, but some other site I have checked. Like, let's say you wanted to buy some like shoes from Nike.com, and the size and everything has been already been selected. You just little bit of taking more time to check out, and by the time you actually submit your
Yeah, I
done,
agree. You know, I agree.
the
Best
item
Buy,
is
Best
not
Buy, or
available.
anywhere else, it always happens. But the
Yeah,
Staples or somewhere else. But Amazon, I have never seen that.
yeah,
That's why I asked this question.
no. And also like a other site like a Walmart or somewhere, like you want to like purchase a, let's say, an item like a bike or something, it's only five is left. It's basically it shows up like the inventory data online. So by the time you go and you can buy, it's basically from 5 becomes 4. And next time you are done with that, so you can definitely can check that kind of situation. Yeah, but not in Amazon. That many of left.
Yeah,
Yes,
talking
some
about
items,
Walmart
there are
and
some items
Amazon.
yeah, I have seen there are some items on from the vendors. Those are specifically like a few items left or something, but it's not a majorly. Yeah, it depends on how the vendor wants to show up to a customer.
So with Walmart, you know, they might have three or four different types of fulfillment, and they might have different inventories for those types of fulfillment. So you have warehouses that ship to your home. You have pickup in store, you have deliver from store, and you might add one to your, you might add an item to your cart as a ship to home item, and then that inventory runs out, and they might automatically switch you over to, buy online, deliver from store, or buy online, pickup in store, or ship to store. They might give you an alternative delivery method if they run out of stock in the fulfillment method that you added to your cart. Kind of discreetly change that.
Cool. Yeah. Um,
So
yeah, lots
can
of
you just complete that, the versioning? But yeah, I think it's got interrupted.
yeah, I think so. The very valid point brought up that do we really need versions if we can, like, if the if we just do timestamps, right? And if we see a change to an existing, so let's say this timestamp has sock, the current version, like the current cart has sock at timestamp like 10 a.m. and then shoe comes in, and we see that the cart that shoe has is different from sock. Like, should we just like merge these two, right? That makes sense. You can do conflict resolution right there. And then same thing, let's say that sandal comes in after that, you could kind of merge them one by one, right? You don't need to have a new version for each of these. Makes sense.
Wouldn't most databases take care of this already? Like, do we actually need to be concerned about the timestamp? Like when you're trying to add shoe to the cart, if the database supports like ACID properties or something, they would take care of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking like we don't mean that we have to do the processing ourselves. Like this might be a database doing the processing. But like even in the database layer, let's say that the availability goes down, right? So I was reading Amazon's Dynamo paper, and over there they specifically do versions of the cart because let's say that they they prioritize eventual consistency. They do prioritize availability, right? And so I guess the argument they made there was that if someone adds something to the cart, for a cart, I guess it makes sense to have consistency, right? But let's say that at some point a machine is not available, then they want to store, for eventual consistency, they want to store the existing version of the cart so that when they are, because availability is prioritized, like copy A might have, like database copy A might have sock, database copy B might have shoe, database copy C might just have sandal. So the database itself handles versions, right? So the database will essentially resolve these conflicts by looking at these versions. So yeah, it is handled by database, but I guess internally the database has versions of this data.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the complication comes in when deleting stuff. And in that case, the database should handle the deletion as well. I think for deleting is something where you would then go back to the user and ask them if this cart was deleted, right? Or if this item really needs to be deleted.
Harsh, you were talking earlier about notifications and pinging, and were you trying to like allude to some method of the server pinging the client to update anything specific to mobile versus web there?
So I think No, I think if you want to update the cart, it doesn't, I guess there's multiple ways to do it. In this simple model, it didn't make sense to constantly poll or for the server to explicitly update the cart when we're already sending API calls there. So you can just piggyback on those to know if the cart has changed. Yeah.
So what API calls would happen though? So I guess we were in the chat talking about different ways to do it, and one of my suggestions was like, listen for user input of some kind, keyboard or mouse input, and then poll based on whether or not the user is active on that device. And you were saying, polling would be, too much. But do you think that that's a viable solution to kind of say, okay, well, if the user's active by user input, then we're going to poll the DB and see if anything's changed?
Yeah, so I think what I was trying to avoid there was extra API calls just to update the cart, right? Because then cart is just one thing. You want to update pricing, you want to update, I don't know, user details, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
just have an extra polling for every single thing you want to update, right? And at least the companies I've worked for, consumer apps, what they do is any API call that they send has an extra global kind of parameters which are optional. So global parameters like has cart updated, or is user, I don't know. So there are optional parameters which if the server wants to send a message to the app, then basically every API call, any API call to the server can send these messages back, right? And
Right.
so
So, but I guess my question is, how does that solve the problem of a static, like you have a shopping cart. It's not a very dynamic application, right? It can sit there and do nothing for a day or 2 days. The user can leave it open. So if you're not making any API calls on a regular basis and you're not like listening for any interaction to trigger some specific check for these changes, then how does that happen unless somebody tries to do something like you said, like unless they try to remove an item? Well, then you do an API call and then you update the cart. But that doesn't really that doesn't actually update everybody's device. It doesn't synchronize people's devices if that's what you're if you're depending on something like that, right? Like
yeah. So, when an app becomes active, usually there's always an API call to update things, right? So for mobile apps, like whenever an app becomes active, there's always an API, usually like an API call, right? So whenever a user opens the app, you'll do an API call to update things. Same thing for web. So web is a tricky one. With web, yeah, with web, I don't know how you would do that, to be honest. Mobile is kind of obvious. But
yeah, I mean, mobile, you have an app open kind of event happen, like they go foreground to background.
Yeah. With web, I think that you have to update, right? I don't think shopping carts just update themselves on the web, right? Unless you do some sort of a WebSocket.
Yeah, I mean, there's sockets, but that's an open connection. That's a lot of
work. I think with
calls.
web you just have to refresh or do some action, some action.
Web
right?
refresh. So what would trigger and when we say web refresh, are we just talking refresh, like a user refresh in the page, hitting the refresh button, or where does that refresh happen? What triggers it?
Yeah, pretty much like a refresh button, or user navigates to another page on the website.
Yeah, but again, that's not truly synchronizing the web application.
Yeah. I think that with web you have to do WebSockets, but I don't think Amazon synchronizes it on web, I don't think.
So if everybody hear me, I can confirm that Amazon, I think they do the navigation to another page. I tested myself, so if I add the item on my iPad and then move to my laptop to check on that page, they doesn't refresh or do anything until I hit another link. So which
Yeah,
means that they do the update at the time when you move to another the area, another page. So they don't actually do like a truly refresh on the web.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess for web, that's there's no choice there. Cool.
I think they could do better, personally.
Yeah, although I don't know if there's like a business need for it, right? Kind of people
I'm
kind of,
sure I'm sure it will update if you add an item or remove an item to cart. You probably will have something
yeah,
like the has cart updated flag on any sort of API call that you trigger with the user interaction. But I'm surprised they don't do just based off of something like scrolling or tapping or
yeah,
anything like that.
yeah, interesting. That's a good point. Yeah, I guess they could if they wanted to. Yeah.
Probably more trouble than it's worth to them.
Yeah, that would increase the load quite a bit, and then I don't know, does that open up things for hackers? Maybe. I don't know. But probably not. Yeah. Cool.
So I have another question. Is this typically how these sessions go? Are they all sort of based on a mock interview and a mock interview problem and someone trying that during the session? This is my first one of these.
Yeah, so we've started this recently. Um, yeah, so this was like the first time we did a the second time we did a mock interview, but in this case, we did a mock interview and there wasn't any kind of lecture, I guess, because I feel like the problem was kind of self-explanatory and the solution was also self-explanatory. So I felt like I didn't need to explain too much. But yeah, so we've basically, the format we've started doing is like half an hour to 45 minutes mock interview followed by explanations. And then just general Q&A, I guess, for the last half hour.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, so I guess I'd love to get feedback from folks on the call. What did you think of this format? Did you go a little less?
So the only question I have is that how distributed this database is going to be, particularly the shopping cart. So are we going to save these cart in multiple servers? I'm talking only about the data storage.
Yeah,
How
that's
that can be
interesting.
handled.
Yeah, so it'll definitely be, so this brings us to like, a general key value store, right? So it's at the core of it, it's a key value store. And so you do whatever you do with key value stores, which is you have replicas, right? Each key value has a replica to two other machines. Same thing applies for cart. And yeah, so you would have replicas for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you take a look at our sharding section, I think we kind of go over that, replicating sharding key value stores.
So initially you sort of pushed them to this key value store direction, but then you guys kind of started discussing other things.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, we didn't get to the key value store direction because I thought that, so first of all, like the person who got this question in Amazon's interview, they kind of, they typed on the chat about that this was what their interviewer asked. Their interview was more focused on this stuff instead of the actual scaling part. Initially, I thought maybe it was the scaling part, So I thought this was because this was a more interesting angle. Everyone kind of knows the storage part, whereas this is a more interesting angle that you don't find anywhere else.
Oh, so in the Amazon interview, they pushed for key value store design.
No, they pushed for this stuff that we asked today, the API, syncing across devices, updating prices. That's what they had pushed for in his interview. Yeah, so this is kind of directly from Amazon in a way.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
One question is that for this question, what we can talk about the capacity estimation and the constraints?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Capacity estimation, I think you could estimate some sort of scale here. So I think like when we went, there's two ways you could think of capacity estimation. The first way is you do all the estimation beforehand, which I think doesn't make sense to do accurate numbers beforehand, but maybe some numbers about how many requests we can expect might be helpful in this case. What I would prefer doing that is doing it during the design. So maybe here, if you remember when we were talking about updating product prices, right? The product price updates, what will we do? I think it would be interesting to see that, to get an idea of some scale. So for example, each product, let's say product A, is probably not added too often in the cart, maybe at most 1,000 to 5,000 times. So these many users have product A in the cart. You can do some sort of estimation of that. So if you have 10 million users, these many users would have added this in the cart, and so you kind of get an idea of, okay, here's the scale we're expecting. Here's how many users we need to update, right? And that would give you an idea of, okay, this approach of subscribers makes sense, right? Whereas if the same number was like 1 million, then that makes it a much harder problem. So that's somewhere I would have liked to see some estimation. But in general, it's really up to the interviewer if they want that. I think more and more interviewers nowadays are leaning away from like hardcore capacity estimations. Right? You should still know it, just in case an interviewer wants it. So we have a section on that, the capacity estimation recording. But yeah, I would try to stay away from that if the interviewer doesn't want that, right?
Okay.
Doing it incrementally makes a lot more sense.
Do we need to talk about anything about data storage estimation, like data size estimation? How, because there are going to be millions of users storing their card.
Yeah, I think that makes sense after. Yeah, that does. I mean, again, it's optional because it's not going to affect your design, right? Your design is going to be the same distributed database design that you have anywhere in any other system. Yeah, so you could talk about it and you could ask the interviewer if they want that, but it's not mandatory. Because all that does, estimating the storage is it makes you, it's helpful if you want to figure out how many machines you need, right? But it's useful to ask the interviewer if they want to design for scale or not, right? Because then that gives you, that's a decision that changes your design, right? Whereas the exact number doesn't change your design.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Any other questions? Any general questions? We can move on to general Q&A now. Any general questions folks have, or any general interview?
Can we, on the interviewcamp.io website, is it possible to filter by tag, like just system design videos?
So you could pretty much search on, so we have a tag attached to each lecture, right? There's no way to filter. You can just, I guess the only way is to search, like do find in page and then search for system design.
Oh,
And
okay.
there is a tag attached to each lecture.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So this was a very high level design, and we haven't really gone into implementation details, I guess. And that's probably okay, right?
Yeah, so in this case, yeah, the whole idea was to talk about these interesting use case. Yeah, so a lot of system design interviews won't go like super deep, right? They want to kind of challenge you with a new situation and see how you handle it. Yeah, and one way of doing that is going deep. Another way is going broad, adding more features. Yeah.
So do you recommend this approach of writing sort of like an outline document versus trying to draw a diagram?
Yeah, so I think drawing a diagram is always the #1 priority in a system design interview. In this case, I think because drawing is a bit hard, candidate might not be too comfortable with it. We kind of skipped it just in the interest of other people watching, but you should practice drawing diagrams on these online apps because that's really helpful. Also, in this case, we were kind of implementing an API. So having that API down early was really, really useful.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What type of programs are usually used for drawing these diagrams? Is that sort of just like there's 100 of them, or one or two that you recommend kind of getting familiar with?
There's multiple, yeah, there's many of them. This one, AWW, is definitely popular. I think there's like I'm forgetting names here, but anyone else have any suggestions? There's a few that companies use. AWW is one of them. Well, usually what's going to happen is they're going to send you the link to which app they'll use. And before the interview, you should just practice using that app and practice the keyboard shortcuts, right? So in AWW, super useful to know these shortcuts, like, oh, L is a line, R is a rectangle. Like I can just switch right away. So I don't need to even worry about, picking the item from the menu bar, right? That slows you down. Just like know the keyboard shortcuts. It becomes way easier when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. I have one general question. Since you're talking about the Amazon cart, so my question is, there are millions of items, right, that Amazon sells, right? So, and they do have multiple warehouse everywhere else. So if you do some order, like there are some prime shipping, any item. So most of the items that we see are getting, shipped the next day. So are they coming from the warehouse that is closer? I mean, from closer to where we are ordering it from, or is it distributed somewhere else? And even if, let's say, someone is ordering from East Coast, right? So are they getting a product somewhere close by the East Coast, or even from the West Coast, they ship it the next day, or how the whole process works?
Yeah, that's an interview question in itself. But basically, it's a warehouse system, right? Which they call fulfillment centers. So they have these warehouses stocked with items, and I think they do a good job with predicting, like usually having stock that's close by. And if it's not available, then they'll have probably some sort of routing between warehouses, right? So I think the warehouses will have two outlets, right? The first is, so think of a warehouse, right? A warehouse will have two outputs. We're kind of assuming right now that these are nodes on a graph, sort of. Right? So let's say you have two warehouses, and the warehouse will have two outputs. First is delivery directly to the consumer, right? So places that the warehouse is close to, it'll directly deliver to people's houses. Right? The second output is delivering items to other warehouses, right? So you can have another warehouse here. And so the purple lines indicate delivery channels between warehouses. So if an item, ideally the item is already available in a fulfillment center. So my guess is, and people from Amazon can confirm, there's probably two layers of these. One is the fulfillment center, which is probably directly connected to users, which delivers directly to users. And I'm guessing there's probably a layer behind them, which are like warehouses, whose job is solely to deliver to these fulfillment centers, right? Kind of a 2 or 3 layered approach. And so
you could add stores also, and now with Amazon Fresh and Amazon grocery stores, the stores almost kind of double as fulfillment centers and sometimes distribution.
Yeah. So that will just add another layer of complexity on top of this. When you add stores, yeah. But purely for retail, I'm guessing they have a 2-layer model, or maybe a 3 or 4-layer model, where one group of warehouses or stores is providing items to the fulfillment center.
Mm-hmm.
And if something is, let's say that this fulfillment center, let's say you order socks, let's say this is San Jose, California, and let's say you ordered certain socks from Nike that are out of stock in this fulfillment center, then they'll probably find a warehouse that has those. So let's say that in California, there's 4 warehouses, right, which act as feeders to these fulfillment centers. So maybe in the next day's delivery from that warehouse to the fulfillment center, they'll request this Nike stock, right? There's probably like periodic deliveries from warehouses to fulfillment center, maybe like multiple times a day, right? And so from the closest warehouse, they'll order Nike socks. Maybe if these warehouses don't have it, if it's like a rare item, then maybe so these California warehouses, let's say, don't have it. Maybe there's like a network of West Coast warehouses that have even more items, right? And so these West Coast warehouses will then deliver to these California warehouses. But in a way, it's kind of like a tree, right? A tree system, which you can kind of bet safely they probably do something like this, right? There's not many other ways to do it, where you have large warehouses which move things to smaller warehouses, and then eventually this goes down to the consumer. Does that make sense?
Yep. The only question is that they determine the prime, right, at the time of displaying the product itself, not at the time of when you submit an order, right? So they know that. So are they checking what location we are browsing from, and based on that, are they saying that these products are available for Prime, or irrespective of where the products are, they are going to deliver it next day because it's Prime?
That's interesting. Yeah. There's multiple ways I can think about it. The first way I can think about it is you're guaranteeing 2-day delivery, right? 2 business days delivery. One way to think about it is like, at what point do you guarantee delivery, right? Do you guarantee delivery when it's at a fulfillment center near you, right? Fulfillment center level? Or do you guarantee delivery when it's at the regional warehouse level? Or do you guarantee 2-day delivery when it's at the West Coast warehouse level? Or do you guarantee 2-day delivery when it's on the US level, where like any kind of warehouse has it, right? And my guess is you can pace it. Let's say that we decide that if the item is on West Coast warehouse, we can guarantee 2-day delivery. Well, how is that? So let's say that delivering from a fulfillment center, let's say San Jose fulfillment center, to a house. So let's draw a house here. Let's make it circular. Right? These are houses. Let's say this takes like 1 business day. Okay, so 1 day. So which means within 1 business day, can we deliver items from the West Coast warehouse to San Jose warehouse in the worst case, right? Can we do this in 1 business day, right? If it's not available in either of these warehouses. And my guess is you probably can, right? Let's say we have 5 deliveries a day scheduled from West Coast to California, and then West Coast to, and then from California to warehouse center, you have delivery scheduled like 3 times a day. Yeah, you can guarantee that, it will reach the San Jose warehouse within 1 business day. I think the longer tail of delivery is probably the last mile, right? That's probably going to take longer because that's the most complicated, because you're delivering to like thousands of houses. Whereas I'm guessing that movement between these warehouses is very quick. So I'm guessing that's how like Prime delivery works, which makes it really useful, because if you can guarantee like, these 3 levels of warehouses where you can go all the way up to US warehouses, then that means that you can pretty much, that's like 95% of your inventory can probably be guaranteed Prime, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you are saying that at any point of time when they list out the products, they know where are the products available?
They definitely know that, yeah. They definitely keep track of everything, yeah.
Okay.
And my guess is that items that are Prime, they are very aggressive in stocking those and making sure that they have frequent deliveries between warehouses, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, I would love to hear if someone from Amazon knows how things work with something like this.
I probably can't tell you because otherwise I'll get sued.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like a high level idea, I don't think should be okay. Because like Amazon people share like on high scalability, like infrastructure details, right? So it should be okay. I don't think it's a big deal.
I'll take a guess. I would say you're pretty close to accurate with your description here, is that items they mark as Prime are going to be required to be at a certain level of inventory within a certain array of their warehouses before they'll be set as Prime. They're not going to guarantee delivery of across the US if they only have a product in California warehouse. So I would say there's probably some strict guidelines around what can be qualified for a Prime item. And
Yeah.
inventory and location are key drivers behind that.
Yeah, definitely. Makes sense for them to do that. Yeah.
So I also heard from one of the Amazon friend. So what they said is that, let's say there is a product A, someone is actually ordering it for a 2-day delivery, selecting 2-day delivery option, and they are ordering it today. And let's say someone is ordering at the end of the day, let's say evening, they are ordering it for the for the Prime Day shipping. So what happens really is that even though the Amazon packs up the same product for user A, because that is shipped to be 2-day delivery, I think at the last minute, if someone says that is actually someone ordered the same product for 1-day delivery, at the last minute they just pack it new for that user as for the 1-day delivery and then ship that one immediately, and then they pack the next product for the second user. I don't know how true that was. That's what he said. That.
Interesting.
Do you mean what I mean? And did you get what I mean?
But I guess I'm confused. Like, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So what I said, let's say I am ordering a product at 7 a.m. today morning, 7 a.m. I am selecting, let's say I'm ordering an iPhone 12, with the 2-day shipping option. I'm ordering it at 7 a.m. today morning, and then Amazon is trying to pack that up to ship it to me. And then someone else at 7 p.m. Ordering the same product, it could be the same area, right? And then they are ordering the same product at 7 p.m. and then he selected option of 1-day delivery. So in that case, what Amazon determines that the same product that was ready for shipping was actually for the user A who ordered for 7 a.m. But there is a new request came in for a new delivery at 7 p.m. who wants it immediately. So Amazon will actually ship the product that was ready for the user A to be shipped to the user 2, because it has to go immediately. The algorithm gets changed in between. Even it is very close to the delivery packet, it gets changed and then it's shipped. So that's what Amazon does. That's what I was told.
Wow. Yeah, that's very sophisticated.
Yeah, so they go with a priority. So they don't go with the order, the timestamp of the order. They go with the priority. So that's what the algorithm consistently that it looks for which product was ordered and who ordered, what is the delivery time. So they keep changing that.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds very sophisticated.
Yeah, they offer Amazon does the Amazon Day also, and they always encourage you to give them a little bit more time. Sometimes they'll offer gift cards if you will take your order a little bit later. And then the Amazon Day is something where they try to consolidate deliveries on a certain day. So yeah, I'm sure there's all types of logic built into their fulfillment.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Luckily, I think for interviews, that sounds like too much of an edge case.
Very specific.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but Amazon's like extremely, yeah, the logistics is just really good. Interesting. Yeah, so any other, has anyone had similar interview questions being asked to them, or anyone has any interesting interview questions been asked to them? Love to hear if there's any other system design questions people were asked in the past that maybe we can discuss next time, if there's any interesting questions. There's a suggestion here, design an elevator monitoring system as Amazon building. Elevator monitoring system. I guess, how does that relate to Amazon? I'm kind of confused. how to design.
Well, one thing is designing a aggregating logs generated by lot of systems into a centralized location.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Aggregating logs?
Logs generated by a lot of machines, similar to CloudWatch logs, basically.
That makes
like
sense.
like a Datadog or
Yeah, so Datadog, which was the other product that you mentioned?
CloudWatch. AWS CloudWatch. Yeah. It does the same thing to it.
Dynatrace is one of them. Dynatrace.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Datadog is like they're specific to profiling and monitoring, right? This is just like having systems, like a lot of logs are generated. How do you like centralize them? How do you move all those?
Interesting. Was this something you were actually asked?
Yeah, I was asked in AWS.
Yeah. Makes sense. That's a good one.
Wait, can you repeat the question again? You were asked by people from AWS?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, I just kind of missed it.
Yeah, so the question is aggregating logs that are generated by a ton of machines.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's an interesting question. It's actually sort of similar to the problem that we're working on at my current place, but except it's not logs from different machines. It's like usage data for different virtual machines and such. It's kind of similar in some ways. You basically get different logs, usage logs from different places.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Design a comment feed with millions of comments.
Is it that same as the forum that we did some time back?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Is there a specific angle to this that the interviewer asked? Like, is it like a storage question, or does a feed have to show certain comments? I guess how is this different from a normal forum question? Is my question. Yeah.
So for log aggregation, what were they interested in particular? Like
they didn't say anything. That's just the question and everything you had to come up with.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sorry, I interrupted people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess how would you deal with millions of comments on a specific newsfeed? Like newsfeed item, or do you mean a post, or?
I think it's similar to Reddit. I think main criteria is millions of comments. I think scaling is what they're looking for.
So I think you mean like if one post has millions of comments, how would you handle that, right? I think that's what sounds like. That's what you, okay, on one post. Got it. And then is the angle more about which comments do you show? How do you rank the comments? Or is it more about how do you store them and retrieve them, like pagination kind of a deal?
Be nice to me.
Thank you, man.
Got it. So more about like scaling it and pagination. Yeah, so that's very similar to like a forum, right? Just a different twist on it. Yeah, that's interesting. There's an elevator question, like how design Seattle office elevator monitoring system. Interesting, elevator monitoring. So does this mean like monitoring different elevators in the Seattle office? Or is this more like one elevator?
In Seattle, Amazon offices, what they do is like there's a kiosk when people enter. They're all like 40-story buildings, and they enter their floor they want to go, everyone, and it tells which elevator it's gonna go. So they go and stand there. I think something like that.
This seems like interesting. Okay, so resource. I think this is more monitoring. So like, if there's any issues, there are critical alerts, resource, and maybe seeing, yeah, just keep track, monitor. Just a general monitoring system, right? Okay. This was more about, you're saying front end and middleware. Okay. Okay. So this actually feels a lot like a very high level design system. It's an interesting question. Yeah. So we have 20 elevators, and each is available via an API. So you have some data coming in, and you want to design and monitoring. Okay, that's an interesting one. Nice.
You can ask a question like design a bug tracker system. I think that's might be pretty standard, actually. Pretty standard question.
Bug tracking system.
Yeah.
Just a standard system where you have users inputting bugs, or?
Yeah, like and the yeah.
Okay, so very similar to like designing a forum in a way, right?
It's different because forum does not. It just comments, whereas the bug tracking system has like resolution, different stages for a bug. It's a bit more involved. It's not just people commenting on stuff.
So that one, it sounds like the challenge is coming up with. It sounds like more of like API design, feature design. Yeah.
Yeah, it's less. Okay. It's less of a scalability thing, because a bug tracking system, I mean, like unless it's like global. Even with a global project, I don't, no open source project has more than like probably 30,000 people working on it, at least at most, maybe even less, probably 1,000. So
yeah.
I mean, I would not expect that to be a scalability challenge. I would expect it to be a product design challenge.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Cool. Yeah, definitely. So we can definitely do. I'm thinking we could try out the logging one next time. I'll think of which other question to do, but
the log aggregator, yeah, that would be great.
It sounds interesting. The elevator one sounds interesting too. It's one of those that's simple that we can make progress quite a bit. But I think the log aggregator is probably something that's interesting to a lot of people. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that brings us to the end of today's session. Yeah, hopefully this was interesting. Yeah, see you guys next week. Thanks for attending.